Hey, welcome to Mooney Reads. So today I had originally planned on making a trans memoir video, and then after some of the stuff that's happened over the past several days, I sort of turned it into a trans 101 video. I filmed it totally, and I was still in a headspace that was very angry, probably a little bit dissociating, to be honest. And I think that's not really what I needed to film. I have other videos on trans topics. I have a trans topic recommendation video that has some 101 books. I even have a if you've read Symptoms of Being Human video that talks about a number of own voices picks, of which the Symptoms of Being Human is not own voices, which is why I used it to talk about other options. What I've decided to focus on instead is recent works that I've read by trans authors that have made me feel empowered or seen in some way. I've got a few books in this stack that I was considering talking about, but I think I'm going to spend most of my time talking about the two that I've most recently read. One that I actually just got done reading today is Beyond the Gender Binary by Alok Faid Menon. I've talked about Alok before and how much I adore them, their poetry, their art, and this book absolutely did not disappoint. My expectations were high and they absolutely delivered. A decent amount of this book is dispelling myths about trans people. So it's a very helpful resource. I think that if you are looking for something 101, this could be helpful. But also if you're looking for generally learning about the trans experience, or regardless of who you are, you should probably read it just because it's beautiful and their experience is important. But the reason that this book in particular made me feel empowered and seen is partly because accessible information on trans people is absolutely necessary. Also, education is kind of my go-to when I'm upset about something, especially a social issue. I will either go to try to make information on it or go to seek information about it, so that I'm either helping other people get educated or that I'm educating myself so that I can help make the situation better. But also the parts of their story that they highlight in here really resonated with me. Even though we're both non-binary, we do have different experiences. I am white and not femme, so we're going to have some differences in kind of the details, but the way that they described experiencing shame and internalizing it to the point of dissociation and like automatically shaming yourself without realizing it is something that heavily resonated with me. On top of that, they talk kind of about how people who oppress others utilize shame consciously and unconsciously, so feeling fear and potential shame in themselves, and also trying to force other people to feel shame about those differences within themselves. Even though that is something that's a negative experience, it made me feel a lot less alone and a lot less broken for kind of defaulting to shame and guilt so often, especially knowing that shame is a tool of the oppressor. So it's something that we're going to feel, but it's something that we should examine to see if it's actually our shame or if it's other people reflecting their shame onto us. So I found that extremely useful and just absolutely wonderful. This is a very small book. It's 64 pages long. So if you can get this book, I'll leave their website in the link so that you can potentially buy it from them. I highly recommend it, regardless of whether you're starting out or whether you're in the community. This is definitely one that I'll be coming back to. The other book that I'm going to be talking about I also read very recently, and that is Trans Liberation by Leslie Fienberg. This was published in 1998, so when you go into this, know that they do kind of use outdated language because that was the language that they had at the time. Also, they, just like with Beyond the Gender Binary, they talk about some of their negative experiences, but the whole book isn't necessarily negative. So Trans Liberation is a collection of speeches by Leslie Fienberg. It also incorporates portraits of other people, so they're excerpts that they wrote about themselves. But one of the biggest things that I got out of this book, and one of the things that Z really focuses on, is solidarity. Solidarity between LGBT people, people of color, disabled people. Z talks about solidarity within the trans community, so between people who are binary and non-binary, people who are more queer versus more kind of standard heterosexual. Z also talks about gay, lesbian, and bisexuals coming together with trans people, all sorts of trans people, and really focuses on the fact that if we actually do work together, we'll get stuff done. Z also specifically talks about the women's movement and how trans people of all shades have been important to the trans movement, and how gender liberation also is a positive for cisgender people, especially women. And that was just really relevant because I read the bulk of this after J.K. Rowling's TERF nonsense. So that's one of the reasons why this book was so uplifting to me. In general, solidarity is essential for any and all movements, and getting to hear it from Leslie Fienberg's perspective was just fantastic. Additionally, the fact that Z included portraits of various people was super neat, but also kind of a part of what is necessary for solidarity. So Z wasn't just talking about their own words and different things like that, but Z went to specific people. Some of the people attended the events that Z talked at. Some of them were writers. Some of them were other important people in the movement. For instance, Sylvia Rivera has a piece in here. And it was really wonderful to see from multiple perspectives, and getting to see just multiple instances of trans existence. There were a couple of pieces from partners. One was a trans woman, and the other was her cis partner. And some of the language that they use isn't what we would necessarily use today, and maybe some of the things that they talk about are problematic if we're talking about it in a nuanced way. However, the big thing that I got from it was that there was somebody that was out there existing who went to a conference in the 90s, that had been in a relationship for a really long time, that was just happy, that didn't have a bunch of relationship turmoil. She was just who she was, and her wife didn't have a problem with it. It was just really beautiful. And then there's also discussion of Stonewall in this, both from Leslie Fienberg talking about it, but also from Sylvia Rivera. Going back to the theme of solidarity, I wanted to read an excerpt. I think that it's really important for queer people especially to acknowledge the need for solidarity and the recognition of intersectionality and the fact that some people within our group are going to have different experiences, and we need to be able to stand up for them. A lot of the growth that we've experienced as the LGBT community has been because of those more highly marginalized people. So this is on page 96. So in this section, Z is talking about fighting back against the police, which, well, you're probably familiar with Stonewall, but this sort of thing happened all of the time where people were being brutalized just for being out and being LGBT. Did we fight back because our love was outlawed or because we were gender outlaws? I never thought to ask myself that question. I don't remember any of my friends ever formulating that question. We closed ranks and we fought hard. Just because I never stopped to ponder that question doesn't mean it isn't an important one to answer, because it clarifies the relationship between our communities. For example, African American and Latina drag queens were on the front lines of the 4 nights running uprising against police brutality in Greenwich Village in 1969 that ignited the gay liberation movement. So was Stonewall a gay or trans insurrection? I recently put that question to Puerto Rican drag queen Sylvia Rivera, a combatant at Stonewall. I asked her, were you fighting police brutality? Were you fighting racism? Or for your right to be gay? Did you fight because so few of the queens could produce the military draft cards government officials demanded that night? Or because so many of you were homeless and hungry and embattled on the streets? Sylvia replied with quiet dignity, we were fighting for our lives. Was Stonewall a high-water mark in the battle for gay or trans liberation? Sylvia offers us the most succinct, eloquent answer possible. It was both. The oppressions overlap in the lives of gay drag people, mixed in the blood we shed when we fight back, are all of the elements of who we are. So I think this excerpt really speaks to the shared oppressions of people in the LGBT community, certainly, but also how it extends past that as well by incorporating things like race and class within all of that. I think in general, hearing about the fact that there were past people in the LGBT movement who were utilizing solidarity is incredibly important and incredibly empowering. There's a really rich history of solidarity, even though throughout a lot of the movements, kind of what we end up hearing about is these kind of broken up movements. We have the gay movement, we have the women's movement, we have the civil rights movement. And a lot of those places, there were definitely groups that were single issue, no doubt. Especially within the gay movement, there were a lot of mainstream organizations that were very focused on white cis gay issues. However, while those were going on, there were also groups who were very dedicated to solidarity. For example, continuing on talking about Sylvia Rivera, she and Marsha P. Johnson, along with some others, put together the group STAR, Street Transgender Action Revolutionaries, and they worked with groups like the Black Panthers, who is a black liberation group. They also worked with the Young Lords, which was a Puerto Rican liberation group. So even as far back as the 70s, people were utilizing solidarity. Go back even further and look at what black women were writing during abolition, when people were talking about not only abolition, but the right to vote and different things like that. Black women were talking about the fact that they had different things going on than the black men or than the white women. Editing back here because I did not fully finish my point. There were African American women who were talking about intersectionality for a really long time before we had that term. But they were also kind of engaging in solidarity. A good example of this is Anna Julia Cooper, who talked about not only the black women's struggle, but also the struggle for Native Americans. So she was engaging in solidarity and the fact that we needed to look at, you know, not just black issues, but also Native American issues as well. So there are a lot of these movements that have really deep entrenched roots in solidarity and in standing up for one another. And on one hand, it is frustrating because a lot of people don't recognize that. But on the other hand, it's also very uplifting because it tells us that people have been there before and that more and more people are hearing about incorporating solidarity, and it is becoming more of a mainstream thing. And I think that kind of entrenching ourselves in a lot of those writings of people who were there before us can be really helpful in uplifting us and in getting us engaged and ready to do some of that work for ourselves. Going back to beyond the gender binary a little bit, this does touch on the fact that it is the Western colonized world that has gender set up like this. So again, kind of looking intersectionally at oppression, we can see how it's important to be engaged in all of these. So these were the main things that I wanted to talk about. They are books that I read recently. They are the books that got me through the J.K. Rowling disturf. Wow. They're the things that got me through the J.K. Rowling discourse and the shitstorm of other stuff that's happened. I'll put stuff in the links because I don't really want to talk about it right this second. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer at some point. You can feel free to DM me in my other social medias. But before I go, I would like to shout out one more book that I started reading. I am not very far through, so I can't speak much on. And that is All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. I have heard nothing but absolutely excellent things. This book is George M. Johnson's memoir, specifically speaking on his experience being black and being queer. One of the things that I've heard from a lot of reviewers of color is that this was very important for them, and I think empowering in certain ways. I will leave a couple of Own Voices reviews on this book below, but I did just want to be sure to shout this book out because this seems like a very important and timely read as well. In the comments below, let me know if you've read any of these and what you thought, and also let me know what book makes you feel really empowered or seen, or a book that's helped you through this difficult time that we're in the middle of. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.